Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Aliens and UFOs video. Alright, I have promised everyone that I was going to go ahead and start a whole new series here based on your suggestions. So be on the lookout for some future videos coming soon. And then yes, I'll delve into some of the past suggestions as well to see if there's anything I missed. This one that was suggested is a strange one. Never heard of this encounter before. There's a lot of really weird, really mysterious things within it. When I was reading the information, I couldn't quite believe what I was reading. Like it's so fantastic, the information that was associated with this encounter, that when I finish sharing with you here, you too will also think like if this is truly just made up stuff or if it absolutely is true, like if it actually happened to this one man. Very strange encounter, very surreal in fact. It has to do with the strange encounter known as the Oso 1 sighting that occurred back on October 25th, 1974. And you're looking at a drawing of essentially that encounter there. If this doesn't grab your attention, I don't know what will. But here's all the information related to it. So, what was the Oso 1 sighting? Well, again, it was an extraterrestrial meeting, I guess you could call it, the closest thing. Not really a sighting because it definitely was a meeting between two parties that occurred on October 25th, 1974. It happened at a place called the Medicine Bow National Park, the northern region to be exact, and it occurred with a father of four known as Carl Higdon. He was a 41-year-old oil well driller. There was an article I was reading, in fact, about more information on this, and it states that this guy Carl was someone who had worked in a company for a good number of years. He worked his way up. He was a foreman of sorts. So it highlighted that detail because, in other words, this was not someone that you could not consider credible. He was someone that he was absolutely had no reason to make this stuff up. He was a credible man of society. He was someone that people, I guess, kind of looked up to. So for him to recount something like this, it definitely adds a lot more credibility to it. So here's what occurred on that day. By pure happen chance, he did not need to go to work that day. I guess there was something I was reading that one of his coworkers, I guess, called out, and so because of it, it didn't make sense for him to go to work afterward. So using that time period, that free afternoon, he decided to go hunting. And when he did so, that's when he went about to that specific region. What's interesting to note is that he was also pointed, again, by pure happen chance, to that region by a set of men, I think it was, or a couple of sorts, a group of people, in other words, that he helped out on the road that had something happen to their car. They were just stranded there. So he was fixing that. They saw that he was hunting, and so they pointed him to that direction, to the Medicine Bow National Park, stating that in the northern region, that would be a really great region that they saw a bunch of elk because that was he was going to go hunt. So imagine if he didn't encounter these people on the road, how things would have been different. So there he was in that very specific region. Sure enough, he saw what he described as some beautiful elk, a nice group of elk, including a prize one of sorts. He took his rifle, and this is somebody again that was a hunter, so this is not something out of the ordinary for him, because what happened next truly was extraordinary. So he fired a shot, and then to his amazement, almost as if it was like in a Matrix type slow motion, that bullet came out of his rifle very, very, very slowly. It's almost as if time was warping around him to a very slow period. So much so that the way he described it was the bullet left the barrel as if it was going through a wall of invisible jello very slowly. So imagine if you had like a camera in super fast mode, so much so that whenever you're filming something that should be very fast, all of a sudden it looks very slow. Very same thing here, that Matrix effect. When it did so, he saw the bullet come out. He was looking at it just in amazement. It crept forward, and then finally it hit some kind of embankment of snow of some sort, and then time seemed to, I guess, come back to motion, because it was at that point that he heard a snapping of a twig behind him. When he looked around, that's what he saw here. What he described as truly a bizarre alien. And this alien, though, introduced himself as Also One, AUSSO, Also One. So that's why this is called the Also One meeting, or the Also One sighting. Here's how the alien looked like. It was supposed to be something about 6 foot tall, the way he described it, humanoid looking. It had on some kind of skin tight black outfit. The way he described it was like a wetsuit, the kind that scuba divers tend to wear. They also had some straps that were crisscrossing his chest, like in the terms of an X. So almost like a fashion statement, as you've seen in some of those weird, like Godzilla movies of the old, how they had those weird crisscrossing effects. It's a very, very same thing here. He even described that there was a belt that was adorning his waist, a metallic belt of sorts that had in it a very large yellow six-pointed star. Within that star, some kind of insignia, some kind of marking, but he could not see what exactly it was. As far as the physical features of the alien, this guy Carl, he stated that he saw that there were no ears on this guy. I mean, on this alien that described himself as Also One. His eyes were also abnormally small, which is quite different than your average gray encounter. They're known for having the largest set of eyes. And then also, and this is something that's a little bit more on the morbid side, you don't realize it, how weird it looks when it's not there anymore, but this creature also lacked eyebrows. So that was also a very distinct thing. It had a large dome-like shape on its head, but on top of it, interestingly enough, it was covered with what Carl said was very coarse hair. So again, unlike anything involving the grays that are completely, covered by skin, bald, just completely hairless. In this case, it was incredibly coarse hair, almost as if the way he described it, there was a stack of straw just growing out of its head. And then finally, it had its lips, if you could call it that, were very, very thin, almost lipless. And it had a very large mouth with 3 large teeth both on the top and on the bottom, and then finally, and also a pair of antennas, like a classic UFO type of antenna, like you would see in a bad Ed Wood type movie, pair of antennas coming out on the top of its head. And then also another strange feature, no chin, and then just a straight face. So if you can imagine that, like the bottom of its face just completely straight, no chin, just extending straight towards its neck, then that gives you an idea of what this Also One alien was. And then here's where it gets truly bizarre, truly surreal. So there he is, Carl, just seeing this thing out of the blue, just wondering, what the heck is going on, and the alien approached him and then bizarrely just asked, "How you doing?" Like he literally just said that, "How are you doing?" That was his response to this petrified guy, this Carl. In his case, I guess he was just trying to stay calm, and Carl just responded back that he was pretty good, but of course not necessarily so. But he was just trying to see, what was going on, if maybe this was a dream or if it was something else entirely different. And so the alien eventually inquired also whether if Carl was hungry. Again, another strange thing. He offered him some set of pills that, the way Carl described it, kind of like floated towards him. And this guy Also One, this alien, described it as a package of some sort, something along the lines of 4 pills, or looked like pills, that would last him for 4 days. So he encouraged him to eat it, because I guess where they were going, it was not going to be someplace that he would be back for some time, or who knows, as far as what was going to happen at that point. But the way he described it was they were 4-day pills of food. You take one of those pills, and each pill would last a day's worth of hunger. And then things again took a more surreal stance. Next thing you know, this alien, the Also One, asked him nonchalantly if Carl wanted to go on a ride because towards somewhere in the back, near where those elk were, was what Carl described like a cubicle of some sort. I'm still trying to picture it in my mind, like how it looked like based on the descriptions, but it seemed to be like some kind of transparent cubicle with those elk at the same time also just standing still. Either they were frozen solid by this alien, not frozen in a sense, but essentially standing still by this alien, or they were still moving in slow motion. Who knows? But the way that was they were there along with this cubicle slash container, whatever it was that was considered the spaceship of this creature, and pointed it towards it, and then just again asked him if he wanted to truly go on board. And Carl eventually said something to the effect of, "Sure, why not?" Again, still petrified out of his mind, but can't really say anything else otherwise considering the situation involved. And next thing you know, Carl stated he found himself in this transparent cubicle along with this alien, this also one. The way I was trying to gauge it too, it seems to be breaking the physical or the laws of physics, because he described this cubicle as being 7 by 7, so 7 feet tall, 7 feet wide, maybe 7 feet in length too. But when he went inside it, it was much larger inside, because he also saw that there were 5 elk inside this cubicle, and then there was also inside a very large high-backed bucket seat type chair just for them, or just for him in that case, along with, I guess you could call it, an area for some levers and some consoles as well. So if this thing was truly 7 by 7 on the outside, and then inside much larger, then it's something weird and entirely different. Who knows what kind of laws were being broken, physical laws were being broken inside as opposed to outside. There's a term for that, by the way. I forgot what it was, but there was that movie Ultraviolet that had that really great movie too, that had that thing happen where on the outside, like they were outside of a container, but when you go inside, it's actually much, much larger inside because it's in another dimension or another realm of some sort. So who knows if that was the same thing that was happening here. So he went inside, and the alien also I guess, led him to that seat. They put on some kind of weird football helmet with 2 wires on it leading towards the back of the chair. They also motioned towards a lever. The way Carl described it was telepathic, like he was able to move, or telekinetic, I'm sorry, he was able to move the lever by just hovering his hand over it. And when he did so, that was it. Like Carl described seeing a sphere underneath this cubicle, and in it he guessed that was Earth. Like all of a sudden they were disappearing from Earth at a very, very fast speed. And also he was someone that was not, let's say, just leaving him out in the blue in terms of being mysterious. No, he was telling him that they were going back to his home, and that his home was somewhere around 163,000 light miles. So notice that keyword miles, because Carl surmised that this creature and wherever they're from, that time to them is different. They're not using the same time that we are. So whatever their distance is, they measure it by light miles rather than light years. So who knows how long that really is in terms of length and time, but he described it as 163,000 light miles. Then they approached this other planet, but there wasn't really much description of it. But whenever they did so, they approached a huge tower about 90 feet tall, and with it there was a very, really bright light, like a bright set of lights rotating on the very top of the tower. You're looking at some of the drawings that this guy Carl did. This was so bright, so fast, so rotating, just like a kaleidoscope of colors. It must have been really brilliant just to look at it, that he had to actually shield his eyes and put it over him. And to some effect, actually, this alien also mentioned that there on Earth, the sun kind of like was the same to them. Like they had to shield their eyes against the sun, as Carl was doing so with this tower of sorts. So they go to the base of the tower, and that's when things again take a more surreal stance. Carl and the alien, this also one, they approached what looked to be 5 humans, 5 more people. They included a gray-haired man of about 40 or 50 years old, a brown-haired girl of about 10 or 11, another blonde girl, this one 13 and 14, a young man about 17 years of age, maybe 18, and then finally a blonde girl of about 17 to 18. And the way Carl described it, they were all dressed in normal clothing as you would see like on anyone else, and they appeared to just be talking amongst themselves. So they weren't in a petrified state. They weren't just like crazy out of their minds exactly about what was happening to them. No, they just seemed to be very calm, very relaxed, just talking it to themselves as if, let's say, they were next to the to the water tower there in your ordinary office and so forth. So this guy Carl, and then finally also approached them. That's when they all in unison moved to a small platform, and this thing, almost I guess you call it like an elevator, took him up towards near the tower, maybe towards the top, and it stopped them into a room where they entered it. And that's when Carl stated something he described as a shield came out of the wall and then started to inspect Carl. Whatever this was, he described it as a shield of looking very glassy. It had a very glassy appearance. It stood in front of Carl for maybe about 3 or 4 minutes, just noiselessly, just there, just standing right in front of him. And then it moved back into the wall. And that's when I guess things finally were coming to an end, because this alien, this also one, stated that after this inspection, Carl was not the one that they needed, whatever that meant, and that it was time to go back home. And so he went back down the elevator, back towards the ship, towards that cubicle, and with a motion of his hand, also one just directed them back to Earth. And next thing you know, Carl found himself back on Earth, but before he did so, that's when also the alien, again in another surreal moment, told him, as he was holding the very same gun, the one at the beginning of the story that Carl fired with that very, very slow bullet. He was holding the gun and stating that he wanted to keep it because it was what he considered a primitive object, but that he wasn't allowed to. Who knows by whom, but it shows another strange world that is, like whoever this guy also was, that he answered, I guess, to others above him. And so they told him no, that he wasn't allowed to keep it. So he gave it back to Carl. And then the next moment that he knew, Carl suddenly found himself standing on top of some kind of slope, almost as if like he was dropped there, just maybe a foot or so above that slope, and then that was it. He was put back down, and he actually went down that slope himself. He kind of tumbled down it, and then he fell down. And then that's when the story took back him to Earth, trying to find his truck. He did find it, but apparently it was about 2 miles away from where it was previously, just nonchalantly dropped in the middle of where it shouldn't be. And it had a tough time. He had a tough time trying to take it out, so much so that later on, I mean, he was still in a disoriented state, but traveling around, he was able to find someone, and when he led him back into their truck, then that's when, still in kind of like a bizarre, disoriented state, he was telling him that that's not where the truck was, and proof of it apparently comes from the fact that where this truck was located, it was making people scratch their heads wondering how did this truck get here, because there were no tracks leading up to where it was, and yet there it was now. So, but that's it. That's the story of Also One, a very, very bizarre, unique, strange, mysterious encounter that Carl had with whatever this creature was, and then finally going on an epic journey of sorts towards the planet, being inspected by something, whatever that was there, that glassy panel of sorts, meeting what looked to be humans, other humans there too, and then finally come back to Earth, all the while of course having his own ET encounter with this alien that self-described, again, this thing described himself as the name Also One. So all very, very strange, very kooky stuff. If anyone has any more information, stuff that I missed with regards to it, that would be really great to hear. By the way, that bullet too, you're looking at a picture of it here, it was examined, because that's the closest thing there was to any kind of physical evidence outside of Carl himself with regards to this encounter, and it was found that only the shell casing was remaining. So everything else that consisted of the bullet was completely gone. Instead, it was just the shell casing that was there, and so that made things pretty mysterious as well. And again, I mentioned that that when he went to some of the authorities, whoever it was, they too, when they were finding that truck, it was very hard for them to realize where it was located, considering there were no tracks leading to it. So another pointing item towards his claims about it being real. I don't know much what else would happen with this guy Carl, if there was something else in terms of him having any other encounters with this alien later on. But again, if anyone has that info, that would be really good to hear too. So, all right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care.